You know, the night on May the 4th of 2007, our community was leveled by an EF5 tornado. But who was Greensburg before that? We're a county seat town of around 1,400 people. Our maximum population was back in the 60s, like a lot of our rural communities here on the High Plains throughout Kansas and Nebraska. As a county seat town and in rural Kansas, agriculture and oil and gas and ranching were our base economy. So that gives you a little history of where we are, who we were before, and those things all changed in the blink of an eye on May the 4th of 2007. Again, Greensburg looked just identical to a lot of the rural communities in Nebraska and Kansas. We were a tree-lined community. Kansas Forestry Department said we had about a 70% canopy over town. The next morning we woke up, the town looked like this. 95% of the buildings were leveled to rubble, including schools, churches, homes, downtown. Very few buildings were left. A wedge tornado 1.7 miles wide, moving at a forward speed of only around 18 miles an hour. So it just sat and churned. It was on the ground for almost 30 miles, starting southwest of town and ending just northeast of town. It had a defined eye, just like a hurricane, to the point that some people in town thought that the tornado was over, but actually it was just the eye going over the top of us. As you see, just mass destruction everywhere, from our water tower that was leveled to the ground, trees gone, homes gone. But you know, we're very blessed with a tremendous opportunity here. We did lose 11 lives, and that's the human factor that we cannot discount. Friends and neighbors. But as you see, school, hospital, downtown, totally gone. Pictures of what the community looked like that morning afterwards, of just debris everywhere, of twisted trees, of cars in places they shouldn't be, of pickups that traveled a half a mile and went through sides of homes. This is the two-story Victorian that my wife and I lived in. It was the house of our dreams. 28 trees in the yard. And just so you know, I did go through the tornado. This is what we had left the morning when we got up the next morning. So the whole town was left with a tremendous challenge. What do we do? The first thing that we had to decide is, number one, should we be humbly grateful that we are here and have the opportunity to rebuild, or should we be grumbly hateful that a tornado leveled our community and took the lives of 11 of our friends and families? We chose the first, to be humbly grateful that we were here and had an opportunity to move boldly into the future. You know, the next morning when we got up, the only thing any of us had left is the only true sustainable thing in life, and that was each other. It mattered not your social economic status in the community. The next morning, we were all homeless. But again, we had each other, we were community. So in a matter of just a few days, FEMA and all the entities, state and federal, were in town, and they put up a big circus tent on the east edge of town at a park where we were able to clean the debris off. This tent is where we gathered as a community. We hugged together, we cried together, laughed together, had community church services together. This is also where we did our vision planning of our long-term recovery plan and our sustainable master plan. We would have anywhere from 300 to 400 people show up at these meetings in the tent. It was also an opportunity for us to gather back because we were so displaced, living with friends, living with family, living in motels in neighboring communities. We were able to come back, and this was a true start of a healing process for us to just be there with each other, again, to hug together, cry together, laugh together, and catch up on where everybody's at and where they're living now. So in the midst of this planning process, right after the tornado, the topic came up that we're going to rebuild green and sustainable because we're resilient people. Well, that terminology you hear on the high plains of green for an old western Kansas farm boy like myself conjured up ideas of 1967 of powder blue double knit bell-bottom pants, of a tie-dyed shirt, maybe hair down to the middle of your back, of what went on in that era. And that is not what we want to do here in my mind, because that was a hippie thing. So I had to rethink what real sustainability is. And as I thought about that, I reflected back on my heritage and my ancestors. Our ancestors here on the high plains were the original sustainable people. As they settled and pioneered our area, they were the ones that took care of the resources that they had available. They're the ones that drilled a life-sustaining water well for their livestock and themselves. They also used that water to cool their cooling house with 56-degree water to cool their milk and eggs. They also pumped that up into a tower, and the sun heated it, and they took a hot shower at night. Those are those resources that they utilized that is what is truly sustainable. As our ancestors taught us, if you take care of the land, it will take care of you. And they also taught us, leave it better than you found it. So here we are with a pile of rubble. What are we going to do? We had 75 to 80,000 semi-loads of debris leave the town in that first month to month and a half. Went to landfill, local landfill here in our county that FEMA and EPA were monitoring, and building materials burned. White goods like refrigerators, microwaves, etc. were all salvaged in one area. Vehicles were stacked in another area. We started the process in the cleaning up of actually being sustainable, of recycling what we could. So those values that our ancestors taught us carried us into this planning process and where we're headed for the future. But when we talked about green and sustainable, we needed to make sure that we had a clear-cut understanding that it was non-political, that it wasn't a right or a left issue or a Republican or Democrat. It's our issue as citizens of our community to be good stewards of our environment, to be environmentally sustainable, financially sustainable, so that what we built back was for future generations. I was sitting at a conference in Chicago here about 4 or 5 years ago making a presentation, and one of the presenters asked me, I don't understand how a small community in the middle of nowhere would even think about rebuilding after being leveled to the ground. And I said, well, sir, you have two things wrong. Number one, it's our home. It's our community, and that's why we're rebuilding. And number two, By the way, we're in the middle of everywhere. We're not in the middle of nowhere. And we got to remember that that's what sustainability is too. Wherever you're at, home is always home. And where you were born and raised is your foundation. It is your character. It formulated who you are. It formulated your work ethic. And that is what will sustain you the rest of your life. So never apologize where you're coming from or where you came from, no matter how big a community or how small a community, because that is home. And that's why it's so important that you maintain that positive attitude of learning from our past, but parlaying that into the great things that we've got for the future. So in the planning process, the one thing we needed to really make sure, and we were encouraged by outside facilitators, to make sure we had all the stakeholders at the table that were necessary to have these honest, open dialogues and discussions. Also, we needed to make sure that we understood who we were. You cannot recover or make build-back decisions if you don't know first what's your character, what's your values, who are you, what are your assets. You have to identify what have you done right. Too many people will always tell you what you've done wrong. Identify what you've done right. What is the good things that went on in your community that you want to continue? Is there systematic problems that you want to change, that now you have the opportunity to change in this planning and rebuild process? So we were able to identify as a community things that were very important to us, as they are to a lot of rural communities and communities all over the United States. So what we needed to do is make sure to discuss what we care about. And that had to be total community involvement. Everyone needed the opportunity to present their ideas, their feelings, their emotions, and go from there. Because if it's only elected officials or a few handful of people deciding how community is going to rebuild or look in the future, it will never work, because you have to have community buy-in and community involvement. The community has to be informed, involved, and engaged in this process. And when they are, then the process will be sustainable. It won't be something that will just die on the shelf, on a bookshelf, of just because you say you have a long-term recovery plan or a sustainable master plan. If you put it on the shelf, it's just going to be there. It's something that is you, and you've vested time, energy in this process. I'm going to go back real quick to something I wanted to show you. As you notice in these tents, we had a lot of people around, and we had easels with placards on them and flip charts that would stations for, like, here's the hospital, here's the school, here's downtown, how do we want these to look? And we were able to go to those easels and with a sticky note at the bottom, put it up on the plan and say, oh, I like this part of it, I don't like that part of it. And some people even said that's a stupid idea. But we allowed people input. And, not everybody likes to get up and talk in front of people. And if you only rely on the ones that are real vocal, you don't get everybody's idea. So that process of the sticky notes worked well. We met every week for 12 weeks. Our facilitators and city planners and volunteers would look at the notes and the placards from week to week and come back and say, hey, here's what we heard. Here's what we revised. What do you think? And we would continue to go through that process. The one thing I would caution in the midst of any disaster, any decision that's being made, and this question's asked me a lot, what would you change? What's the most important thing? And I say, well, don't make life decisions rapidly. When you make life decisions rapidly right after an emotional event, there's a tendency you're not truly thinking through it. Give it enough time. Give ideas the chance to incubate, to grow, to be dissected, to make sure this is what you as a community really want. You have to define what your region, what you want your city and your region to be 50 to 100 years from now. What kind of community do you want to leave to your children? The great law of the Iroquois Nation says that in every deliberation we must consider the impact on the 7th generation or 7 generations ahead. So every decision that we made, we wanted to make sure and continue to make sure that we think through it enough that we're not being just crisis managers, but visionary managers for the future. Because it's awful easy to let the realities of today cloud your vision of that bright tomorrow. A lot's going to change, so don't confine yourself to those little things. Don't be confined by them, but yet be able to make a difference where you can. Identify what you need to address in that short term. That's crisis management. But visionary management is where do you want to be long term for the future. Also, in the midst of everything we did, we celebrated every success. From every groundbreaking to ribbon cutting to grand opening, we made it a big deal. And we continue to do that because we're 7, almost 8 years this spring out of it, and we're still struggling at times with that we're not doing things fast enough for some people. You know, when you lose everything, there's a tendency to want to be back to a sense of normalcy, that you want everything just the way it was. Well, life changes. It changes every day for us. And for us truly to be sustainable here on this, in this environment, we need to make sure that we are willing to be adaptive and resilient to those changes that come our way. So sustainability really is a systems process. How do we change our problem-solving techniques and our decision-making processes? You know, we had a choice as a community. We could either just be a surviving community or we could be a thriving community. And within that choice is I'll just use an analogy. It's kind of like the owner-renter thing, but I like to use the analogy of since we're going into winter, it's that community wood pile. Everybody's going to use off the wood pile to heat their homes. But if you want to be a sustainable community, you're going to be also the one that's going out and cutting the firewood and splitting it and putting it back on the wood pile. And that's what makes your community sustainable, is you have to be active and own your community. And we all do that, whether we're buying Girl Scout cookies or when the junior class comes by and wants to sell magazines. We are all being part of making our communities that better place to live and work. So in the midst of all this, it's about new dynamics and better methods of how do we move into the future. This is what we kind of looked at, we decided was going to be what the community looked like. And in a lot of cases, it's almost identical to this. I would invite you to log on to greensburgks.org, which is our city website. You can view our sustainable master plan and our long-term recovery plan for when you're at 2 o'clock in the morning and can't sleep. It's great reading and viewing material. But this gives you something to look at the process we went through. Now, I encourage every community that's out there that you can't exactly copy what we did, but you can emulate the process. And that process is front porch discussion, honest, open dialogue, and listening and listening and listening. Because if you don't listen, you will never truly gain what the whole community really wants. So what is sustainability? Now, for me, it's the capacity to endure. It's the ability to continue in existence. And that's what we all want. Excuse me. I apologize. But sustainability is systems thinking. Too many times we get caught up in the thinking that it's just environment. That's the only thing that's important about sustainability is we got to be environmental stewards. Yes, we do. We have to. But we also have to have a thriving economy. We have to have commerce. And we also have to have us as citizens or people. You know, you can build the greenest community in the world, the most sustainable, but if you don't have businesses there that people can work at and make a living, it doesn't matter how LEED certified all the buildings are. So it's all part of a process of bringing together that true sustainability of everything, business, environment, and people. So each community is, and we had to decide, how do we run our community system to provide a better place to live and work for all of us? And in the midst of that, of the discussion, and as we decided that, it wasn't all rosy. There were some very stimulating discussions in this process of, yes, we want to be sustainable and resilient, but yet we don't want to inhibit the ability of us, now generation, of business and building back. But yet we didn't want to hinder future generations from their ability to meet their needs. In this process, one of the things that was very evident to us was, how can we utilize that very wind that blew our town away? How can we use it to generate electricity to supplement our traditional energy generation in a cost-effective manner so it's financially sustainable, but yet also maintain our electric rates? Greensburg is, we are our own utility. And so we maintain our own distribution network. We buy our electricity off the grid. We were able to build a community wind farm of 10 turbines that generates 12.5 megawatts. Our peak consumption right now is running about 4 megawatts. So there's extra there for the city to put on the grid. We belong to electrical co-op called the Kansas Power Pool that takes that extra electricity that we don't use, and our fellow sister cities are able to say that part of their portfolio comes from wind generation. So that was one way to get started to be sustainable. Also, I throw this slide in for the simple fact, as you notice at the bottom, there's an oil well. We are in an oil and gas area with our agriculture, our farming and ranching. So we have to understand in the United States now on the renewables that until we're able to store massive quantities of electricity, we're still going to have to rely on traditional electrical generation. But we can be smart about how we use traditional generation in combination with renewables. And renewables will continue to be a higher percentage of all of our portfolios as time goes by. By being those environmental stewards, we can not only use the wind and solar, but also we can extend the life of our traditional generation through fossil fuels, through whether it's coal or natural gas. And at that same time, load equalization, so we can all go over to the light switch and turn the light on, and the switch on, it's still the light comes on. There are countries in the world that don't have that luxury. There are times of the day when they don't have electricity. Also, the other thing we need to make sure in all that we talk about here, and I think this is what true sustainability is we have to address our consumption. Does our consumption truly increase our quality of life or not? And I'm asking that as a rhetorical question for each one of us to truly answer ourselves. Because in the midst of it, if we continue to be voracious as consumers of goods and services, it's not at a level that we can maintain so that future generations can still meet their needs. Now, we can get into a lot of discussion about climate and the environment and why renewables and all this, and I won't go down that road. What I will say is we as humans can have a positive or we can have a suboptimal impact on our environment. And each one of us only know that in our specific situation. And for us to get that out of the political realm and to transcend that politics is to get to where we in our own communities, our own personal lives, our businesses, our community colleges, our universities, whatever influence we have, is to just be environmental stewards and good stewards of the resources we've been blessed with. So those are some of my thoughts on sustainability, of where we're at. There is one thing I would like to share before we go on of where we're at today in Greensburg. Is in this recovery process and post-disaster, too many times in the United States, communities and individuals feel they're entitled, that the government was going to come and make them whole after a disaster. Well, as we all remember, the government is of the people, by the people, and for the people. So it is us. So it's our job to make ourselves whole. Federal and state agencies are there only to be of assistance, to walk hand in hand, to help you recover in any situation. The only thing we're entitled to in life is the opportunity to achieve. I didn't say be successful, I said achieve, but that's our responsibility through vision, through hard work, and that is that opportunity that was provided to us, sad to say, by a tornado, and it took a major disaster to get us woke up enough that we were really a dying community. Our biggest export in Kiowa County and truly throughout the High Plains has not been our agriculture products or our cattle. For the last 40 or 50 years, it's been our youth. We sent them off to great educational institutions all over the world, and we provided very little opportunity for them to come back to their roots and their heritage for a way of life, a way to feed their family and quality of life for them to live. And we'll get into that when I start talking a little about economic development and what we can do as the communities in rural America to start changing that pattern and providing those opportunities. After we got the rubble all cleaned up, two of the first things that went back in place was our electrical distribution system and water tower. Now, the water tower served several purposes. Number one was life-sustaining water for citizens, but also a beacon of hope rising above the rubble that says, yes, Greensburg's building back. And it also showed the community that if I decide to build back here, I'm going to have water, I'm going to have electricity. I know that all the infrastructure's in place that I can build back. So those are the great success stories that we had to share with our community that says, yes, the municipality is committed to rebuild. Excuse me. And we encourage you to. As part of the process also, we as a city council, and I was not on the city council at the time, but they passed a resolution in December of 2007 to build all structures over 4,000 feet in the square feet in the city back as LEED certified, striving for LEED Platinum through the U.S. Green Building Council certification. Well, the first LEED Platinum facility in Kansas and in Greensburg was our private 547 Arts Center. I'm showing you these because it wasn't dictated by the city that any private enterprise had to build in any form or fashion, green or sustainable or whatever, other than our base codes. But because of all of our meetings that we had under the tent, all the discussions we had, it was very evident to people that they needed to build better, bigger, stronger to maintain property values, to maintain, lower their maintenance costs long term. The second LEED Platinum facility in Greensburg was a residential facility of townhomes. Very traditional construction. So as you see from one building to the next, you can be sustainable and you can be LEED certified without it architectural looking like it came from the moon. This also provided these townhomes opportunities for some of our senior citizens to come back to our community that didn't have the time or the energy to rebuild, but this was still their town and they wanted to live here. They tried to live in the neighboring communities and it was never really home. So this has been a real asset and a blessing to our community. Also on downtown Main Street, we lost every building but one. And so businesses needed a place that they could set up shop. And so we talked about a business incubator, and this was where public-private partnerships came together and meant so much for all of us. Federal funding through USDA Rural Development, City of Greensburg money, USDA Rural Development, and also private enterprise. SunChips Corporation, a division of Frito-Lay, invested $1 million in this facility, which is 5 retail spaces and 5 office spaces in the upstairs area that provide opportunities for businesses to get started at very low rent, to come in with a solid business plan, to be able to get a cash flow going before they could hatch out and get into their own business. We have a series of cisterns that are here to capture all the gray water and the rainwater that are pumped back through the systems. There's solar on the roof. And as you notice the roof line, this building to your left faces to the south. And the angle of the roof that shades in the summer the sun from hitting those south-facing windows. When I first looked at the design of this, I thought about Wow, that's pretty new age, until I thought it more and it looked like my grandfather's chicken house. Because he knew in the winter, if he could get more sun in from the south, his hens would lay more eggs. And most milk barns were designed this way too, because the cows would milk more in the winter. So again, our ancestors were truly the original sustainable people in that design. And this complex, this business incubator, is working out very well. We just had a local business that just got started, moved in today, that's got a great idea, and they got a solid business plan, and this provides them the opportunity to get started in that endeavor to help grow our community. Also, part of our infrastructure is we looked at our consumption, and we looked down the road and how do we truly be financially sustainable. We went to all LED street lights. Remember, all of ours were blowed down. So yes, they are more expensive. LED is more expensive up front, but it saves us about 40% on electricity that the city does not have to pay for. But it also saves us 30% more on maintenance. We're not getting the bucket truck up, climbing it, getting up and replacing those sodium vapor lights. The LED has a longer lifespan, and when you figure the full life cycle of it, it actually makes them cheaper and easier maintenance. So we're figuring it saves us close to 70% of the through electricity and maintenance of our old street lights. City Hall, our new City Hall is, if you notice the brick on City Hall, there's 75,000 brick that went back on City Hall, a brick that was reclaimed from the rubble, as is the wood reclaimed on the awning. The construction of this building is ICF, insulated concrete forms. So it's built in a manner that will withstand sizable wind. And the question's been asked to me all over. Are you building buildings back that will survive another tornado? And when I say no, their jaws drop, because I said, you have to understand, short of living in an underground bunker, we are not going to survive another tornado without some property damage of that scale. What we are doing is building buildings that minimize loss of life and loss of property damage. The one thing we strove in this process through National Renewable Energy Lab that was here for 3 years in town, that helped us in the process of planning, is they also did energy studies on buildings all over town as they were being built to see how they worked, to see if they were performing at the level that the architects and the engineers had designed them to. It's a tremendous learning process for us with all the technology, with the advanced heating and air conditioning systems, with solar on a lot of the buildings, with wind, and also geothermal. We have more geothermal wells per capita than right now anywhere in the world. Our incubator building that I showed you has around 23 geothermal wells in a closed-loop system. Our City Hall has a couple geothermal wells in an open-loop system. So as you see, as you come and visit Greensburg, we're a living laboratory of a wide variety of building materials, of design, of operating systems. You know, we used to walk down the street and we wave at each other, just waving, say, hi, how you doing? And now when we get in meetings in buildings, we're all waving like this, trying to get the lights to come on because they're motion censored. And people think that you're a little crazy when you're doing that, waving like that. But it's learning the systems, learning the sensitivity of it. And that's one thing that has generated jobs and employment here in our community also, as we go on through our presentation of the advanced technologies of our young people coming back as we provide opportunities for employment for them in monitoring systems, in maintenance, and those things. I talked about insulated concrete forms. Our public works facility is opposite of that. It's pre-stressed concrete with 4-inch styrofoam in the pre-stressed concrete. So that just to give you an idea of the wide variety of building materials that were used. This is the Kiowa County Commons that I'm sitting in today, visiting with you, that makes up several entities. You know, it's a whole lot cheaper to put 3 or 4 entities under one roof than it is to build 3 or 4 different buildings. The Kiowa County Commons has our county library, our Kiowa County Historical Museum, a Kansas State Extension Service, and it also in the foyer as you come in is our soda fountain out of our old Hunter Drug that was salvaged downtown. Hunter Drug is where our youth and our citizens always went down to get a soda or a malt or a shake. You all remember back of those soda fountains in drugstores all over our High Plains. We were able to salvage that and put that in the entry of the Kiowa County Commons. The fourth entity that we're very, very proud of is the Kiowa County Media Center. We're able to broadcast all our high school, junior high, and grade school activities live on the internet. The Media Center has a trailer, a full studio trailer that they take to events and are able to broadcast that. So if you're grandma and grandpa in Grand Island, Nebraska, and can't travel to Greensburg to see your grandchildren either play or be in a musical or in sports, all you'd have to do is log on to the internet to KiowaCountyMediaCenter.com and you will be able to watch those activities right there. This facility has also given us the opportunity, as I mentioned, Grant Newhold, our executive director of the Media Center, has gone out and they have done state basketball tournaments and broadcast them live on the internet. Gubernatorial debates this fall in Wichita on the internet, all headquartered right here in the Kiowa County Media Center in Greensburg, Kansas. Here's another economic development opportunity too. At any point in time, the Media Center hires 3 to 4 people full-time that are working on these projects. And they work on promotional advertising. They can do a full range of things through on-site, off-site, for any activity anywhere. So that is something that those highly educated students that are interested in that field could come back to our community, raise their families, and have them go to school in a school that is brand new, state-of-the-art. And this is that new school. The school also works well with the Media Center you just saw on media classes and production of all those activities that I were previously discussed. The school is K through 12. We had several attendance sites throughout the community prior to the tornado. We were able to long-term planning, be able to put everything on one campus with a middle wing of a commons area of the library, of lunchroom, of gathering area. We also have state-of-the-art fiber optics that come in not only to the media center but the school, that we're able to do distance learning. We belong to a network here in South Central Kansas in our rural school districts, and I know all you in the education end know this, but that being able to get on a network, not every school district can hire a Spanish teacher or a calculus teacher, but we're able to transmit from, there's 10 schools in the network. We're able to send and receive, so we can offer every opportunity for our students to take at whatever classes they need, as well as bring education from post-secondary to corporate. Everything can be done right here in Greensburg. Just a sample of what the school looks like. We're also, I have people that say, well, why did you go to a turf field? That's not natural. That's not sustainable. That's not what it should be. And I said, well, ladies and gentlemen, you have to remember, that's recycled plastic to help make that turf up. We don't have to water it. We don't have to mow it. We don't have to fertilize it. And it is also a facility now that we're a regional draw, where we're hosting regional activities, from playoff games to football playoff games to, and at the school, volleyball and basketball. We're holding district and regional track meets here because of our location in South Central Kansas. So this facility not only is provided for the community and the school, but it also draws people to our community that spend time with us and also spend their dollars here as they're here for activities, and those are important for our sustainability. As you notice in the background, we also have the school has a wind turbine. As the superintendent of schools, Darren Hedrick, says, every dollar that we don't have to pay on utilities is dollars that we can spend on education. And we all know budgets are tight in education. The school also has cisterns that collect all the rainwater and run that back through gray water systems. And again, as the superintendent says, any water we don't have to buy or electricity we don't have to buy educates, enhances those opportunities for our students. Our Kiowa County Memorial Hospital was right in the middle of town. We had a clinic in another location. We had a dentist office in another location. We had the fire department in a different location. Medvac, our helicopters couldn't come in without us getting people in ambulances and them transferring it. So what we're able to do is put everything on one campus, from a 15-bed critical care access facility to our Greensburg family practice. We have full lab, X-ray, CAT scans, everything available that you need, to even a designated room in the hospital that you can isolate for isolation in case there's a communicable disease or a major something happened that you really need to isolate someone. So we're very blessed to have this opportunity to put everything on one campus. As again, you notice the wind turbine, and the hospital sat down and did the math on it and said, yes, we can save money by having our own wind turbine. Part of the fabric and the heritage of our community is our seniors. So our Kiowa County Senior Citizen Center is right across the street from our new Prairie Point townhomes, and it provides that opportunity for not just seniors, but the community to get together. Last week, they had a community Thanksgiving dinner, and the grade school students all came down and sang songs for them, and they worked projects together. It is a tremendous opportunity to match generation youth to generation of age together to pass that knowledge on from generation to generation. We were very blessed that we had some tremendous resources, federal and state, come to this community. And we can't say thanks enough for that. And we couldn't have done it all on our own. But here's a project on Main Street that is a business complex that a nonprofit was started and started raising money just on their own, and raised just close to $2 million to build this facility, so that when businesses hatched out of the incubator, they would have an opportunity of places to go. And now they can move across Main Street into their own building and be able to rent and lease this at the same time and continue their business without having to build a new building. You know, that's a struggle we had. Prior to the tornado, a lot of the buildings that were owned on Main Street were from out-of-state owners that have been passed on from generation to generation. And I don't fault them. They took their insurance money and chose not to rebuild back. And some of the lease money they were getting on that was very, very small amount. Lease money on a brand new building for a business would be high, and you take a business that's just trying to recover from the tornado or trying to get started, and them having to make mortgage payments on a building makes their business plan even more difficult to achieve. So this building and the incubator services our community and service our business community for them to be able to be successful. Part of what we did in the community too, we had a theater on Main Street, a small theater that had been here forever. And the community had committed that we wanted a theater back, and this was nonprofit. This is not a city project or a county project. The school did not build an auditorium or a theater. They put money into this, into the nonprofit, so that we could have a 450-seat performing arts center that not only shows movies, but the school uses for their productions of live performances. We'll be able to bring in all kinds of acts and summer theater and community theater. There's all kinds of activities planned for this, and it should be open right after the first of the year. So that's one thing we're very proud of, that we did as a community, that we donated money to, that we raised funds for and made work. Now, when we're talking green and sustainable, we don't have to go out and get Architectural Digest and open a book and say, oh, we got to build to these standards. The most sustainable building in the world is the one that's already built. This is the Robinette building that was built in 1915. And as you see in the upper center, that's what was left after the tornado. Just a few windows broken out and a little damage to the facade on the south side. It would have been a real travesty to tear this building down and start new. This is our heritage. This is our history. This is the architecture of our region that was proven to work in 205-mile-an-hour winds. So real sustainability is learning what works and what doesn't work within each individual microclimate. And the people that owned it have their antique store on first floor, and they remodeled the upstairs, and that is their residence, where they live. Again, all of our downtown was wiped out, our grocery store and everything else. Dillon's division of Kroger decided that, and they were here prior to the tornado, decided to come back and rebuild. And in that process, they investigated how could we be more sustainable in this building. This is a state-of-the-art. They call this the Greensburg Prototype. It has ICF construction. It has natural daylighting with skylights. It has advanced lighting system. The refrigerated and freezer cases are all state-of-the-art, advanced. And it's one of those unintended consequences that we have here in Greensburg of our own utility is people aren't using as much electricity, and they aren't using as much water with low-flow fixtures and all those water-saving techniques, that affects our water fund and our electrical fund. It's an unintended consequence, but it's a great unintended consequence that we're dealing with. We had a variety store prior to the tornado, and a company, Family Dollar, committed to coming back, or coming to the community. And that keeps sales tax dollars here in town. The people don't travel to Dodge City or Pratt, because if you're traveling out of town to buy some of the little things, you're probably going to end up eating out. You're going to buy more than you need when you go to the other community because you've traveled that far. So if you want true economic development in your community, you've got to shop at home, and you've got to do business with the people that live and work with you. As I said, private enterprise also grasps the idea of sustainability, of being LEED certified. Our John Deere dealership, owned by the Estes family, made the commitment that they're going to rebuild their whole facility LEED certified, and it ended up LEED Platinum. A tremendous facility that reuses all the oil in radiant floor heating, all natural daylighting, tremendous amounts of insulation, quite a work environment for all the technicians in the shop and the parts up front and the salespeople. Also, they understood in that diversification that was needed is they opened up BTI wind energy, and now it's just called BTI Energy because they started out as dealers for small and medium-sized wind turbines throughout the western United States and 6 Canadian provinces. And those technicians from all over the United States come to Greensburg and are trained in this facility on working on wind turbines. So they've set up a network with other agriculture dealers, and they're also now diversified into solar. So that's just one thing that has helped generate a few more jobs in the community and make us quite a bit more sustainable and long-term durability of the community. I wouldn't be very hesitant if I didn't mention this, our Kiowa County Courthouse. The windows were blowing out. The roof had a big gash in it from a 1998 blue cutlass that went over the roof and bounced off the roof. So it was clear full of water, clear full of debris, and the county commissioners made such a visionary decision in my mind is to invest the money to refurbish it. Some people in the county would have said, oh, just tear it down and put up a metal building. Register of Deeds, county clerk, and all them can work out of that. But you know, this is our heritage. This is our history. This is who we are. I showed you City Hall. I showed you the school and the hospital. Well, the courthouse here is the bastions of democracy. This is where you go to register to vote. This is where you go to vote. This is where you get your tax statement mailed from, and this is where you have the opportunity to pay your taxes. When you talk about courthouses, city halls, school boards, hospital boards, those are where bastions of democracy in our local communities, where we make a difference, where we are informed, involved, and engaged in those processes that make our community our communities. Greensburg has always been known as the home of the world's largest hand-dug well, which you could view from the outside and then had a standalone gift shop. Well, the gift shop was destroyed, and we decided as a community what we wanted to do. We had to preserve that because we have 60 to 70,000 tourists a year from all over the world come to Greensburg to see the big well, but also to see what we're doing in the sustainability field. It allows us to display our heritage and our history of who we are, of what happened with the tornado, and then also the third part of the museum is the sustainability recovery planning process. I talked a lot about being blessed with an opportunity of having that opportunity to rebuild, that opportunity to get together under a tent to heal. Some of the first buildings built back in Greensburg were our churches. And that shows you the moral fabric and fiber of this community and the resilience of this community. New homes all over town continuing to be built, from SIPS panels to ICF construction to traditional construction to houses that are being built to be homes, for people to inhabit and be homes. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we live in the most exciting time in history right now. And why I say that, even in the midst of what you all hear on TV and reading the newspaper and catch off of Facebook and all those things, we have to share what we do right. And we have to encourage each other and offer hope for a bright future. It's time to be bold. It's time to step up. It's time to tell the naysayers, hey, that's not true. It's time to dispel some of those things. And as we move boldly into the future, we understand that as a community, what were our driving forces? What are the things that are important? And so our vision statement was simply this, that we're blessed with a unique opportunity to create a strong community devoted to family that fosters businesses and that's working together for future generations. You know, we're just called to be humble servants with a vision and a commitment to a brighter tomorrow. So in the midst of us all talking today about sustainability, about Greensburg rebuilding in Kiowa County back from a disaster and making it bigger and better and stronger, the real question we really need to talk about, and we need to ask ourselves and we need to ask each other is, do we want to leave our communities, our region, our state, and the world a better place for future generations to live and work? I want to thank you all for the time today, and thanks again for the opportunity today to visit with y'all. Thank you.